Every music producer dreams of this one scenario. You make a piece of music, you share it with the world, and the next day you realize that not only has it gained traction, but you've actually gained the attention of someone in the music business who has a name, but they also have some reach. And for me, that happened when Russ saw one of my sample breakdown videos on TikTok and liked and commented on it. But this isn't just a video about how I got a popular artist's attention. This is more so a video about how I got there. So today, I'm gonna give you an in-depth breakdown on how I made this original soul sample that was good enough to get Russ's attention, and give you some pointers along the way to help you make your own. So for this sample, I started off with an instrument called the sitar that I got from Omnisphere. One of my favorite things about this instrument, other than how it sounds obviously, is how well it handles melodies. In fact, when I came up with this melody, I was originally inspired by groups like the Jacksons and the Stylistics. And as far as effects are concerned, I'm really just doing some basic EQ to clear out some frequencies that I didn't want. Now for the next instrument, I decided to go from a sitar to a guitar just so I can add a little bit more depth and character to it. And for that, I decided to go with Omnisphere again, and I'm using the jazz guitar preset. Now this guitar preset actually sounded okay on its own, but it was also a little dull. So the first thing that I decided to do was I ran it through a guitar reg instance, and I'm using the clean chorus preset. Now next up, I felt like I needed to start nailing down the rhythm of the sample, so I added some bass. So this bass line is actually really simple, but later on as I add more instruments, you'll start to realize how much it's actually helping with the rhythm of the sample. Now as far as effects are concerned for the bass, I pretty much went with my usual chain. I started off with some EQ where I'm raising some frequencies, but I'm also cutting out the subs because I don't really need it for this type of a record. Next up, I'm using R-bass to work on the frequency of the root note. Then I ran it through a bass amp room and then some compression to basically even out the sound. Next up, I decided I wanted to add a string section. So first I started with some pizzicato strings that are kind of playing a double role. The first role is it's adding to the melody, and the second role is it's actually also contributing to the rhythm. And for these strings, I went with Contact, and I'm basically just using the orchestral library that comes with it. Now, I felt like I wanted to add some emotion to the sample, and hands down, one of the best ways to do that is by adding some ensemble strings and just playing them as chords. And then as far as the effects are concerned, I'm really just using some EQ, again, just to carve out some frequencies that I didn't want, just to add a little bit of color and warmth to the strings. I'm using a plugin called the SiQ, I think that's how you pronounce it, but it's from Sound Toys, and I find that it sounds really good when you just take it and use the thickener preset just to thicken something up.
That's what she said?
And now we just got 2 more instruments to go. Now, as I listened back to what I already had, I felt like it still needed something melodically. Like it still kind of felt a little incomplete. So what I decided to do was add a flute, but use the power of call and response. So in the case of this sample, if the guitar and the sitar are the call, then the flute is the response. To strengthen the melody even more, I kept the first call the same. And then changed the second response. And don't tell anybody, but that pro tip right there is definitely a secret weapon that you can use if you want to improve all of your melodies. So for this flute, I went with probably my favorite Contact library from Project Sam called Lumina, and I'm using the Legato alto flute. And then as far as effects are concerned, again, I'm really just using some EQ. And then I'm also routing the flute to another bus channel that has a reverb on it. And then last but not least, as much as I loved what I already had, I had to throw on some light percussion. So for both the tambourines and the bongos, I'm using addictive drums. Now, one of the reasons that I like going with plugins like these instead of just going with one shots for my drums is because it gives you a more natural sound. Because not only do these types of plugins give you built-in velocity controls, depending on the velocity that you're playing the drums at, you'll notice that they're actually using different drum samples, which helps to add to the realism. And then sometimes when you layer different drum samples together, it helps to add to the realism even more. And now finally, we fast forward to the full sample that Russ heard. That is how I made an original sample that was good enough to get Russ's attention. If you want to use that sample in your own music, click the link in the description. I also included a free 10-pack of royalty-free samples that you can use in your own songs today. And if you're into making music like Rick Ross and you want to learn how to make his signature luxury Maybach music sound from somebody who's actually produced multiple songs from him, check out this video right here.